Plenty on the dot, so I'll just get started now. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Nora So, the Senior Program Manager for Policy Modeling for Health, based within public health at the University of Glasgow. Policy Modeling for Health is funded by the UK Research and Innovation as part of its £35 million Population Health Improvement Network. This supports innovative research aimed at tackling the wider determinants of health and reducing inequalities. Our work is focused on developing advanced computational models to help policymakers explore the likely effects of different policy choices on health outcomes across society. This webinar series offers insight into our activities presented by members of our research team. Each talk is designed for a general audience, but with opportunities for you to ask questions, and recordings of all events are available on our website. So now I am delighted to introduce our speaker for today, our Policy Modeling for Health Director, Professor Petra Meier. Petra is Professor of Public Health at the University of Glasgow, and she is currently the academic lead for Glasgow Changing Futures, Healthy and Equitable Futures at the university. She has been responsible for major investments like Cypher, a £5 million consortium addressing health inequalities, and is currently co-lead on Gallant, a £10.3 million project focused on building climate resilience in Glasgow. Her talk today is a slight departure from our usual webinar format as Petra draws upon her experience to reflect on practical strategies for leading large interdisciplinary research consortia. Please feel free to submit questions anytime via the Q&A tab, and we'll come to these at the end of the presentation. So Petra, over to you.
Thanks for the intro, Nora. That's great. Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining today's lunchtime session. As Nora says, I'm Petra Meier, Director of the Policy Modeling for Health Consortium here at the University of Glasgow. Most of my career has been spent working on and then leading those large-scale multi-institutional research programs. If you've been involved in anything similar, you'll know that they aren't just bigger versions of ordinary grant. They're more like a own species, I'd say. There's no handbook on how to lead them, at least as far as I'm aware. So most of us learn by doing, and sometimes quite painfully. So today I just wanted to share a few patterns I've seen, things that I wish I'd known earlier, and some honest reflections of what tends to tend to help and what doesn't. I haven't got this sussed out, so it's not a kind of my way or the highway presentation, but more here are some potholes, some shortcuts. Please enjoy. And feel free to share your own tips and tricks later in the Q&A session. So, without further ado, let me move my slide forward. First of all, a reflection on what makes large-scale research programs complex and different to sort of the ordinary smaller-scale research program. So for me, large-scale programs try to tackle grand challenges rather than tidy start-to-finish questions. So unlike, say, a clinical trial where you'd expect to have a clear answer at the end, these programs tend to stretch across long time frames, multiple grants often that build on one another. Many disciplines are involved, universities and also external partners. Budgets can be so large they make you gulp a little, especially if you think that, you may be burning through 100K a month. Research tends to evolve midstream as priorities shift. These programs are long and often in quite applied areas, so the context around you can sometimes change dramatically. And so for me, leadership of these programs is less about knowing every technical detail and far more around keeping the scientific vision coherent, even when things around change, create the conditions for great work to occur, trusting people who have deep methodological or thematic skills while keeping enough oversight to avoid some nasty surprises, and to manage change effectively. Most of us spend our PhD and postdoc years learning how to be in tight control of every detail, and letting go of that instinct and adopting different ways of working was one of the steepest learning curves for me. But let's go back to the beginning, research ideas and where they come from. So for me, big programs need to start with something that I'm genuinely excited about. On the rare occasions I've gone after opportunities that didn't align with either my interests or values or both, two things happened. Either we didn't get funded at all, or even worse, we did. And then I can sometimes had times where I regretted winning the grant, and it was, years of doing things that I wasn't massively excited about. So ideas for me often start from random conversations, a news article, a talk, a moment when something clicks. I keep an ideas folder in on my laptop that I can just drop things in. Many ideas die a glorious death. I've also got a folder now that's called Ideas Graveyard, where I just park things that are never going to see the light of day. But it's really useful to have a regular habit of collecting sparks for just in case something comes along in terms of funding opportunity or a collaborator or something that then allows you to sort of think these ideas up into something that flies. To test whether an idea is worth pursuing, I tend to talk to lots of people. I'll have a particular, can I explain it clearly? And the more you explain it, the clearer the idea gets, both in your own head and in the way you explain it. Does anyone else get excited about it? And, no secret to say that sometimes I get very excited about ideas and nobody else does. That's probably not the ones that are the most promising ones. And then eventually, practically, is there likely to be a funding route? If the idea survives, then some groundwork really helps. A quick bit of literature mapping, some preliminary analysis, some seed funding if you can get it, early chat with potential partners. This early stage is really where I build the argument that the idea is new and urgent, feasible, and crucially, something that I have the right people to work with. So once that groundwork's done, you just need to strike lucky and get the right funding call. And sometimes that's not just luck, it's a little bit of management and having the right conversations as well. I do tend to stay in regular contact with funders to get a sense of what might be coming and also to shape those conversations where the opportunity arises. When something does look promising, I then decide whether I want to lead or whether I want to join. Both absolutely valid options. And, thinking about that early on is really important. Often we're now in situations where universities have demand management processes where only one bid can go through, or bids can go through only after quite rigorous pre-testing. So it's really important that research services or whatever your institutional equivalent is knows early on that you've got an interest in a particular call. For me, the team is everything. So team building is massively important. I look for not just the right disciplines, but also the right personalities, people that I can imagine working with for the next 5 to 10 years. Really, really important. I think what needs to be clear is that a consortium can't just benefit the lead institution. Everybody needs to have a really good reason to commit. Otherwise, the work just won't get done. And it's something that we try to articulate really early on is why is this of interest? How would it help you and your institution and your team and so on? The structure behind the bid is really important. With a large bid, you can't write detailed plans into the case for support. Quite often, £1 million worth of work is just a paragraph worth of text. So what I now try to do is to write something like an internal shadow bid. So something that clarifies the roles, interdependencies, the deliverable for every piece of work. And every time I skip that step, I've really regretted it. So it's something that I would encourage everybody to do is have a larger document that goes into a little bit more detail of the work that you're setting out to achieve. A little bit on budgeting. Costs from multiple institutions swell quickly. My rule tends to be to protect project management, admin, and comms at all costs. They are not luxuries. They can't be scaled down without really affecting the work that you do. So definitely build that in. And also definitely build in some flexibility if funding rules allow, some discretionary fund or innovation fund or however you call it. But future you will be really, really grateful. The chance that everything proceeds exactly as planned are zilch. And, you just need that flexibility to respond to any problems, any opportunities that occur along the way. Just a little bit on sort of from my perspective as reviewer and panel member for these large scale bids that come in. Um, what really helps is if you can use the funder's own language. It makes it much easier for panel members and reviewers to see that you meet the funding call head on rather than having to do some translation, and to keep the aims and objectives consistent across sections. You write these things over many months, and often there's mission creep, there's different people writing different bits. I have written and reviewed bits where there's so many conflicting versions of what the team is trying to do, and it really doesn't help. It's very confusing. So yeah, take any guesswork on the part of the panel out and be as clear as possible. What helps is internal peer review, of course, and also an internal pre-mortem. I tend to ask my team and also the internal peer reviewers, if this bid fails, why? Why do you think this might be? And usually what I find is that across the team, people know where the weaknesses are. So be brave, ask them, bring them out in the open and see what you can fix before you submit. And then interviews, really interesting. I found mock interviews really helpful. Paying attention to the choreography really matters. The first interviews I approached as oh, I've got to be on top of everything. I just need to be really good in the subject matter. But really what matters almost more is to show that you're a confident leader, cool under pressure, and that you know how to play your team. So bring the right people and then know which questions you can direct to others. And that sort of models your leadership and gives the panel confidence that that is, how you're gonna work as a team if they fund you. Best moment of the job is to send out the email, "We got it," to people and watch for joyful responses to roll in. It is really the best thing, finally after a year's worth of work or whatever, you get the phone call or you get an email, "Yes, we would like to award you this thing," and then you send it to everybody, and people get very excited, and it's just nice. So then, you've got the enthusiasm, you can't wait to get going. And what happens? Lots of paperwork, lots of contract work, lots of logistics that take far longer than you'd expect. So really important stage. Project infrastructure. Hang on, I have skipped ahead. So project management infrastructure, massively important. What I find often is that the research itself often runs quite smoothly. What does cause friction is everything around it, the governance, the communications flow, the budget management, the cross work stream coordination. So a good program manager and a strong administrator are really worth their weight in gold. And I'm not just saying that because Nora is on the call. Contract and budget setup are really important. They can take months, sometimes over a year. We've just had that it was over a year before everything was in place and we could start to recruit. Sometimes non-university partners can add further complexity in that process, and just knowing in advance what each partner needs before they can start recruiting helps schedule work more realistically. There's no point in saying we'll do everything in month one if that isn't when you can actually get people into posts. Governance structures are important and make clear which decisions happen at directorate level, which at executive or group level, and which can happen within the work packages. And those kind of clear boundaries reduce confusion, but also allow autonomy, which makes my work much easier. Policies, I mean, yes, big projects need to think about publication policies, comm strategies, the approach to impact, data policy plans, and so on early. A lot of future conflict originates from not having these things nailed down. There is huge variation between what's considered normal practice in different disciplines, and different expectations that are not made explicit cause real issues. And I've experienced that in both projects that I've led myself and others where I'm just a partner. Internal communications, again, really important. Regular meetings are essential. Some of those should be in person where at all possible. But I've learned that too much information can also be harmful in the same way as too little. So curated channels really help, whether you agree to work on Teams or or via newsletters or structured updates or however you do it. Just make sure most people are as happy as they can be. You'll never strike the exact right balance for everybody, but checking in and making sure and reviewing as necessary is really important. Impact doesn't happen magically. You won't be surprised. At the end of a 5-year program, if you haven't had the structures in place from day one, it's unlikely that you can articulate what it has achieved and what it's done. So I think thinking about a theory of change really helps. And to know that the outputs only matter that they really lead to outcomes. Changes in policy, behavior, and technology. You can have the best papers and models and data sets. If they're not being used, then you've just wasted an awful lot of public sector money. So theory of change for me helps identify what will change and how that change will happen, who will make the change happen, and how you can know early on whether you're on the right path to this change, even if the actual things that you want to change happen much, much further down the line. Then a miracle happens is beautiful in spirituality, but terrible in logic models. So be as specific as you can about what needs to happen for that full impact of the program to be realized. There's a long middle in every project, and that is the hardest bit of any program. We probably all know the slump. The initial excitement is gone, but results are yet to emerge, and everything feels a bit slow. People may stop coming to meetings, frustration rises. That's quite normal, I think. Happens in most projects that I've been involved in. But the art for me as a leader is to distinguish what are actual problems and address those head on, but also what is just the natural rhythm of long projects that you get over if you just have a bit of patience. So are things genuinely slipping, or is this just a long, quiet stretch before results then appear and bubble up everywhere? I do tend to insist on regular attendance at meetings. If people drift away and do their own thing, there's a real risk that you lose the coherence of a program. And also, there are things that help, small wins that need celebrating, as do nice personal news like people marrying or having babies or adding furry friends to a household. All of these things can sort of really help know and stay connected and stay in touch, even if things go a bit slow. Some common challenges: senior academics with too many priorities, including me. I ask people to pay particular attention to aspects of the work that have interdependencies and that can create roadblocks to others, and tend to be a bit more relaxed about things where a bit of shifting to fit in with other priorities doesn't matter for other people, as long as work is done and the commitment's still there. Staff turnover is a real problem in interdisciplinary projects, as skills and resources are dispersed and can't easily be replaced. Ongoing documentation helps, good handover notes help, but recruitment cycles in UK academia are so slow and painful. Better expectation management helps, but doesn't really eliminate risks. So if anybody's found a good solution, let me know, because this is one of the big things that causes trouble time and time again. Interdisciplinary friction is a thing. Publishing norms are different, workloads are different, expectations, everything is just quite different in different disciplines. And adopting something that we call disciplinary hospitality, I think, is essential. Being made to feel as if being a novice in someone else's world is absolutely welcome and safe, that you can ask the questions. And as a director, I try to do that. I ask the stupid questions, hoping that that just helps normalize that not everybody knows everything or even most things about a project, and that's just a given. Some things will go wrong. There's always going to be the unexpected, external changes, internal challenges, possibly many things. Cypher, which Nora mentioned earlier, it encountered Brexit. There was COVID. There was 5 prime ministers, 2 first ministers in Scotland, and defunding of key organisations. I mean, you couldn't have made it up at the start. Not plain sailing by any stretch of the imagination. And the only reason I think we stayed afloat and could deliver anything at all was budget flexibility, constant reprofiling, and a shared commitment to really that bigger mission of what we were trying to achieve. And personally, having quite a few people with whom I could have a proper whinge over a cuppa or a glass or something. I mean, it really just helps having other people in the same boat who you can talk to, and when things get tough, have a listening ear. So, assume you've made it. You're in the final year of your project, maybe. So, have you planned for legacy? Have you thought about what that final showcase is going to look like? Or are you sort of, managing that really late on? The cliff at the end of funding is real, and sustainability needs planning much earlier than we'd usually think. In policy modeling for health, we're halfway through, 2 years into a 4-year program, and we're already starting to think about what's the next step, what work do we want to take forward, where might funding come from, and that, even though it feels like we've only just got going, but because those funding cycles are so long and it takes a while, it is really important to start doing that. Impact after the money ends is important. We embed evidence users in our projects, for example, through embedded researchers, so that impact is more likely to continue beyond the project, when we have to move on to new bits of funding. Halfway through the program, as I say, I start asking what's next. Long funding decision cycles means we need to prepare early. Data and outputs need to be open access wherever possible and kept up to date. Sometimes we manage to do that through the next step funding. So, for example, Cypher assets have fed into policy modeling for health assets so that we manage to update them through the new funding that we've managed to acquire. The most important thing, I think, is people. I feel a really strong responsibility to our teams, and we invest in training, mentorship, networking, and leadership opportunities. And close to the project end, I try to jigsaw budgets to help people finish work and to move on successfully, or indeed to new grants that I've managed to acquire myself. So, just to sum up, leading large-scale research programs is challenging, occasionally chaotic, and at times overwhelming. Leading your team seems the top of the iceberg, and you keep the chaos away from them as much as possible. Ideally, your team sees the top. The best leaders for me are those who are not hero academics, where it's about me, me, me. So look at me, I'm the great leader. But those that keep the show on the road and don't get in the way of good work. But also remember that as a leader, I'm not on my own. If I need it, there's a whole team there to help me problem solve. And with diverse teams, the advantage is that there's very diverse ways of coming up with solutions. So knowing when to ask for help, I think, is equally important. So personally, I find leading these type of programs deeply rewarding, intellectually, socially, and in terms of real world impact. If today's session has given you any help, any shortcut or two, or reassured you indeed that the chaos is normal, then I'll consider that a success. Thank you for being here, and I really look forward to any questions or discussions without any guarantee that I might know the answer. Thank you very much. Over to you, Nora.
Thank you, Petra, for such fascinating and invaluable insights into leading complex multi-partner research programs. And double thank you for shouting out project management and administrative support being essential. We now have an opportunity for some questions. So if you have not already submitted your questions, please use the Zoom Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen and we will get to as many as time allows. So Petra, first question. What was the best piece of advice you've been given around managing such projects?
Tricky to say what the best piece of advice was, but I remember, as we were preparing for the interview for Cypher, we had some really hawkish people in the mock interview. Very supportive, but also, just really honest feedback saying the pitch isn't working, it isn't landing, it's really unclear. I was trying to answer all the questions myself, not, bringing in the team in the right way, and basically giving the impression of someone who's really nervous and doesn't quite know what they're doing. And that was really painful, made me possibly even more nervous to start with, but it was such good tips because we reran another mock interview, and we changed the whole choreography, how we were sitting, how we were bouncing off each other, and I think that really came across much more strongly. So something about interview choreography, if you're lucky enough to get to that stage, I think is really important. As something that, as someone who's sat now on many panels where interviews were a thing, is something that a lot of leaders don't quite get quite right. So maybe attending to that is it was the best advice I had there.
Thanks, Petra. Second question is partners' priorities and expectations can change across a project. So, what one practical strategy have you found most effective in maintaining genuine interdisciplinary collaboration over time?
A bit of pragmatism and a bit of walking the floor. So, if you're out on the shop floor, if you talk to people regularly, this won't come as a surprise that, things shift, especially in the policy partner world, but also, institutionally, financial rules change, the way hiring practices work and so on, but also, other projects that people now have that they weren't aware of before. So I guess the more me and the program manager know about these things, the more we can knit things together and find solutions where they need to be found together with, the people in the institutions where problems occur or where shifts are done. But I mean, quite often it's also opportunities. If you're alert to things cropping up that you could arguably tilt towards, then you should take that opportunity without losing the scientific mission. I think so. Having the overarching mission and goals of the program always in sight, but checking whether a new opportunity is something that would actually be better than what you'd planned to do, but equally deliverable without, causing extra stress and strain on other parts of the project.
Um, the next question is, what would your advice be for early career researchers as future research leaders?
Get involved in these big things and reflect on both the doing of the research and the doing of the interdisciplinary collaboration. I think it's how I started. Is I was involved in some of these 20 million pound big things and saw what people were doing, helped draft bits of major bids so that I got a sense of, how that proceeds. It's quite different, to your own thing where you just write everything, how you draw those things together. And it's the kind of, see one, contribute to one, and then do one kind of thing. So yeah, get yourself involved when you've got the opportunity, and don't be shy to ask questions. University of Glasgow and other institutions have got lots of people who do this kind of thing, and if you want to know something, just shout out.
Um, there's a question that says, I also manage a few complex large projects and find it hard to keep oversight of all the moving parts. Do you have any tools that you use to keep tabs on things?
Well, my tool is having a really good senior program manager, and what tool she uses, I don't know. Just being on top of everything. No, I mean I lead various of these programs at the same time, and there is no hope, especially also with a university leadership role. There's no hope that I would know about all the moving parts and be alert to them unless people tell me of things that are going on that are maybe less visible, especially if it's large and distributed and multi institutional. So yeah, partly program management, partly a distributed leadership structure where you've got people looking after particular aspects of the work for you, and then having good oversight committees, whether they're executive boards or whatever you call them, where people bring anything that they're aware of. I think that's proven to work really well for me.
Petra, the next question says, at what point does a policy modeling program become more about governance than modeling? And how do you prevent models from becoming quote unquote black boxes for decision makers? And then if I can tack one more onto it, it says,
Mm.
how do you see AI changing large scale policy modeling in practice, not just in theory?
Yeah, good question. And different questions, I think. So the one about more about governance than modeling. I think modeling without the governance is, literally just, you've got a model and nobody uses it. So I think those need to go hand in hand. You need to know why you're doing the modeling and how it's going to be used and by whom it's going to be used. I think that does prevent models from becoming black boxes because if you've got embedded researchers, if you've got people involved in your modeling activities and there's joint decisions around how the models should evolve and what is represented and what data goes into them and how exactly you do them. At the moment, at least, that creates a lot of transparency. How that will work with I don't know. It's something I'm really interested in because so much of what AI does isn't necessarily massively transparent, although you can prompt it to give you some of that information around what it does exactly. But capabilities should obviously increase massively in terms of the sheer data wrangling and creating input populations out of several other data sets and so on. I don't think that'll be something where it'll be as manually taxing and as time consuming as what it is at the moment. I hope that goes some way of answering it. These are difficult questions that we're grappling with live in this program.
Indeed. Um, and another question focuses more on your experience. So, do you have any tips on how you manage that shift from being in control of all the details of the project, like soon after your PhD, to now like leading um other eventually like big program grants and not being involved in like more the smaller details, but the
Mm.
sort of overview?
I mean, for me, this has happened more by accident and not in the way that I would have liked. I just ended up going to an EPSRC sandpit where I thought I was going into what is a social sciences led thing. I thought I was going to an ESRC sandpit and ended up being the only social scientist and, much in demand with others and ended up with a massively interdisciplinary, complex, but very difficult, not large program, but it was so difficult. So I learned a lot. And made a lot of errors and mistakes whilst doing it. So maybe that's not the way to do it. I think it is more through possibly a fellowship or I'd go for, sort of the £500,000 to £1 million as starter grants in this, where you try to involve some disciplines, but maybe not many disciplines, many institutions, and many program partners. You could do something just within your institution, but more multidisciplinary, or involve partners, but not necessarily all of the disciplines, or approach it carefully and start to learn something. But also, just start to lead work programs within larger bids. I think that's the other thing that we often see is that up and coming researchers take responsibility as first for a work package and then maybe for a whole work strand made up of several work packages and then start to lead these big beasts. I think all of those are completely valid, but that loss of control is a real thing. That you can't can't lose control over the overarching shape of the whole thing, but the specifics, you've just got to trust the people who know what they're doing, that they're doing it well, because you will not have the technical expertise in all aspects of the work. That just doesn't happen.
Thanks, Petra. That ties neatly into the next question, which is it common for leaders to forget details of smaller projects? And this person said, I've been wondering if this is expected, as I sometimes have extra work because of it. Yeah.
Quite possibly. One would hope that that would be picked up or communicated through the program management structure. It shouldn't be that someone ends up doing all the work that someone else is not aware of. If if that happens, and I mean it's very likely to happen. When you've got with Gallant or so, 80 researchers involved with policy modeling for health. I think there is 60 to 70 people. I don't know what everybody exactly is doing. So yeah, if there's problems, um, program manager or the PI would be my first port of call for that, and just yeah, speak out and hopefully it can be resolved.
Gotcha. So last questions. In your talk, you mentioned there needs to be budget flexibility. What kind of things have cropped up where you had to find extra budget?
Oh, loads. So you know, sometimes you don't realize you need someone with a particular set of skills. So you've got people, or in terms of who you manage to recruit, there might be particular gaps because that ideal person that you'd envisaged doesn't quite exist or something. So often it's for filling gaps in terms of technical competencies or just things that would really smooth the way. So an extra policy-facing researcher or an extra person who can help in policy modeling for health. For example, we've just created the post of a data visualization expert because we felt that that would really help bring some of the data stories that are now emerging to life. If we had someone who actually, was an expert in how you do that. And that's not, the program would live without, but it's just going to help us achieve our impact much better and reach further. So if you've got a bit of flexibility to see what's needed later on, that can be really, really helpful. Or in terms of Cypher had an innovation fund, it allowed us to work with new partners who were really interested in our work, who we didn't know about to start with, but who reached out and said, well, can you do something like that with us? And we could kick off work and sort of show that there is interest and joint purpose there. So those kind of things come up. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Petra. And this concludes our Q&A. So thank you for joining us today for today's webinar and for all of your questions. A full recording will be available on the Policy Modeling for Health website next week. So please share with colleagues who were unable to join us today. We are taking a short break in March, but our lunchtime webinar series will return in April, and details will be available on our website and socials shortly. I would also invite you to subscribe to our Policy Modeling for Health newsletter, which provides quarterly updates on our work and upcoming events direct to your mailbox. Details will be sent with this event recording. Thanks again, Petra, for sharing your insights, and to all of you for joining us. Have a lovely afternoon. Bye,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.